Hey everyone, welcome to another video. Today we're talking about 5 beginner drummer mistakes, or 5 mistakes that beginner drummers make. Okay, these are things that I see my new students have struggles with often. So here is the 5 things in no particular order. The first mistake that I see beginner drummers make is just hitting their drums too hard. And what I mean by hitting too hard is actually the force with which they are hitting the drum. So I see a lot of students they just are going for broke on every note like this. And that is not something you want to do. One, because it just looks uncomfortable. But two, it's really exhausting. If you try to play every note, actually putting your maximum force behind the strokes, you're going to tire yourself out. There's no way you could make it through a full concert or music set playing that way. What you need to do instead is realize that the volume from drums comes from how high the stick is above the drum before it hits it. You need to focus on letting the drumstick do the work and getting the volume out of the drum, not actually hitting harder. So just think about your volumes in terms of stick height. If your stick is starting up here every time, that's going to get you a really powerful, like, forte volume drum stroke. If you want to play soft, think about getting your stick heights low. Hear how loud those last hits were? And it's not like I was using that much effort. I'm just getting the stick to a higher point before it hits the drum, and then you let the stick do all the work. So that is the first mistake, hitting too hard. The second mistake is very similar to the first one, although it's a little different. Hey, Jacob. The second mistake is hitting the hi-hat too hard. You can always tell a beginner drummer if they start to play and it sounds like this. There's almost nothing worse sounding than a drum groove where the hi-hat is just dominating the mix. You have to understand that the hi-hat is one of the loudest parts of the drum set because it's really high-pitched. They're usually smaller in size, although large-sized hi-hat cymbals are pretty popular nowadays. But in general, your hi-hat, it's a very cutting sound. You need to hit the hi-hat half as hard as you think. So really back off the volume on the hi-hat. It's going to get a much better drum mix, the volume of all the parts of your drums compared to each other. You want the kick and snare to be louder than the hi-hat, generally speaking. There's some genres of music or instances where you might want the hi-hat to be louder, and then you can adjust and play it harder. But your hi-hat, you need to make sure you're not playing it too loud. That is the second beginner drumming mistake that I see all the time, playing too hard on the hi-hat. So again, listen to the difference. The first way is playing hi-hat too hard, and then the second way is just backing off on the hi-hat. Again, let the cymbals do the work. The hi-hats are so loud naturally. They're going to cut through. You should try to go a lot lighter on them than you would think. So here's playing too hard on the hi-hat and then a proper hi-hat volume. Instantly sounds better, right? Okay, so the third mistake that I see beginner drummers make is sitting too high on the drum throne. Okay, I've got a lot of students, they come in, I've got these rock and sock seats here in the drum studio, which are awesome, by the way, and they go and raise the drum throne way up here, and then they're playing like this. Now, it depends on the student. If you're actually really tall and your legs are long enough to justify having a tall seat, that's a different conversation. But I'm just saying, in general, it's a mistake to try to raise the seat too high, because one thing that does is it gets you at all these weird angles on hitting the drums, especially on the snare drum. So you notice if you're sitting too high, now your hands are resting on your thighs when you're trying to play the snare drum, which is one of the drums you're going to use most of the time. The only way you could avoid it, I guess, is if you move your hands towards the center. But I always am telling my students to sit maybe a little bit lower and raise their snare higher. And that's because I have found it's really helpful to have my snare height and seat height so that when I'm playing on my snare drum, my hand is not hitting my leg. So when you can really focus on doing all the rolls and snare patterns without hitting your legs. And this is something I've really focused on the last few years, watching certain drummers and trying to notice things about their setup, is they put the snare drum much higher than I used to play it. It does take some getting used to, but having the snare higher goes right in hand with not putting your seat too high. So make sure your seat is not too high. That's the third drumming mistake that I see beginners make. Okay, the fourth mistake that I see drummers make this is a really bad one, and this is obvious if you see it, but you will be surprised if you've never drummed before and you try to do it. It's very natural to start making this mistake, and that is pumping your elbows for every stroke like this. Okay, again, it first of all just looks really uncomfortable. Second, you're going to tire yourself out, and you're going to reach a threshold where you can't keep going. You can't sustain that intensity and that pace for a long period of time. So what you do to correct this, what I tell all my students, is focus on the tip of the stick. If you look at the stick as it's hitting the drum and it's making an arc, then you know you're doing something right. That's how it should look. It should always have this arc motion to it. And it can have that arc motion to it with actual different grips on your sticks. Like you can have that with a palm facing down, with a molar technique like this, and with like a French grip like this, where you're playing the stick with your fingers mostly. But notice with all of those, the stick has this arc motion to it. Okay, you don't want to pump your forearms where the stick is moving in a straight line as it's hitting the drums. It should have this arc to it. That is the best motion. Okay, that is the fourth mistake that I see beginner drummers make, pumping your elbows. The fifth mistake that I see beginner drummers make is gripping the sticks too tight. Here's how you can tell you're gripping the sticks too tight. If you're playing and you start to hear lots of little double hits or buzz notes, kind of like that. That means you are actually still applying downward pressure on the stick as it's hitting the drum. It's kind of difficult, and that's why it takes practice, but when you want to have your hand be relaxed as it makes contact with the drum, so that all the energy from the stick goes into the drum and not back into your hand if you're holding it too stiff, and if you're holding it too tight and pushing down, you don't want use the drum to stop the drumstick, or the hi-hat, or whatever you happen to be playing. That comes from over gripping on the sticks. You don't want that. It's going to give you a choked sound. The stick itself actually can sound choked when you do that. And also the drum is going to be choked. So you need to focus on being relaxed. Now that doesn't mean that you have to have this super open, loosey-goosey grip where you're going to drop your sticks. It just means you can have a firm grip where the stick is in line against the palm of your hand, but as you play, you are relaxed when you make contact with the drum. So if you're hearing any double hits or buzz notes, that means you're over gripping the stick. That is the 5th mistake that I see beginner drummers make. To summarize, very quickly, here's all 5 mistakes again. Hitting too hard, playing the hi-hat too loud, sitting with the seat too high, pumping your elbows while you play, and over gripping the sticks, holding them too tight. Those are the 5 mistakes that you want to avoid, okay? Thank you guys so much for watching this live drum lesson. I hope that you enjoyed it, that this was helpful for you. Yeah, if you're interested in taking a drum lesson from me, you can schedule a lesson by visiting my website, jaredshantos.com. And yeah, I will see you guys in the next video. Thanks so much for watching.